In this video, we create an Earth, put a satellite on it, and move it along a path. Our SVG animation consists of two basic SVGs. The first one is Earth and the second is satellite. For Earth, I have come over to Many Pixels to download a royalty-free illustration and set up some values here. Let's download this SVG. That's done. Now let's head over to flat icon and download this satellite here. I'm downloading the free version, but I will be attributing the author in the description of this video. Let's open this first SVG in Figma. As you can see, there are a lot of unnecessary elements in this SVG and we will remove them one by one. Just select the element you don't want and press the delete key to remove the element. Okay, so we are left only with the continents. Now let's draw a boundary around it by selecting this ellipse tool and drawing a circle by pressing the shift key. Let's reduce the pass through value to 50 so we can properly see the dimensions of this circle. Let's scale it down. Let's add a linear gradient on this circle. Make sure you change the opacity to 100 and add a new point just before the center. Now let's change the direction of the linear gradient. That's done. Now let's revert the pass through value to 100. What we have to do now is drag this ellipse to the bottom of all the elements so we can properly see all the continents. And now let's group all of these elements by pressing Ctrl or Command G. Rename this to Earth. The first part of the SVG animation is done. Now let's edit the satellite as well. I have added the satellite SVG on top of Earth SVG. Let's scale it down, rotate it, and remove all the necessary elements to make it according to our liking. Okay, let's rename this to set. What we have to do now is create a path for the satellite to move along. Let's select our ellipse tool here and draw an ellipse, rotate it and place it on top of the Earth. Now let's remove this fill color here and add a stroke. Now rename the container of the SVG and export it. Select the SVG option, make sure this option is checked as well, and export. Now we will head over to VS Code and see how we can animate this SVG using CSS. I have opened the project folder in VS Code. Let's create a new file, index.html. Name the title to animation and select this SVG code and paste it in the body tag. Let's create a new file, style.css, and link it in our HTML. Now let's do some basic styling. So HTML and body, let's set the height to 100% and the background color to AAA. Let's set some styling for SVG as well. So position will be fixed, top 20%, height 60%, and we can just duplicate this and set it to left and width as well. Let's add another property in here. Okay, let's open this index file. This is our SVG, and what we need to do now is set up some CSS to move this satellite along the orbit. Let's go back to VS Code and set up an animation with keyframes. Name this orbit, start from 0%. The property name is offset distance. Set the value to 100%, and I will duplicate this, and the end is at 100% and the offset distance is at 0. Now let's select the satellite by using the sat ID we set up in Figma and set up an animation. First we will name the animation for 2 seconds, but we want to do it is linear and we want infinite counts. We'll add the offset path property. And in this function we have to pass in an SVG path. Let's head over to HTML and search for orbit. Select this value and paste it in an offset path. Save it, and now let's go back to our animation, and as you can see there is some animation but it's very disruptive. Let's go back and add in another property which is named transform box. Let's set it up to fill box and go back to our animation, and as you can see the satellite is now moving along the path but it's still above the earth. What we have to do now is head back to Figma and edit the path so that this area of the path is behind the earth. We are back in Figma. Let's duplicate this earth SVG and rename it. I will drag this SVG on top of other SVGs. Now let's create another ellipse. It has to be the same size as of the earth. Now let's cut the circle in half and rotate it to fix it to the upper portion. Once that's done, let's drag this ellipse beneath the half earth SVG. You can see that the orbit is behind earth, and what we have to do now is select this half circle we created and create a mask. Now you can see that the orbit on the upper portion of the earth is behind it, but on the lower portion it's above it. So this SVG is now fully completed and we can export it. Now let's get back to VS Code and complete our SVG animation. We are back in VS Code, and now we will update the SVG code in index.html. Let's head over to loading.svg to copy the updated SVG file and paste in the new code. Of course, again we will have to update our orbit path. So let's copy this and paste in. Let's go back to our browser to see the changes. Now as you can see, the upper portion is behind this orbit and the satellite is moving along it. If you want to remove the color of the orbit as well, head back to VS Code, index.html, and remove this stroke black on orbit path. Let's go back, let it refresh, and as you can see it is moving along smoothly. So this is it for our animation, and if you found this content to be helpful, kindly like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.